I'd probably give that guy a deal.
But we've still got 15 races to go. Bloody long way yet.
Yeah, true.
It's a hell of a way, isn't it? If we shift focus then, rather than scrutinising third in the world standings and saying that he needs to buck up his ideas, should we have a look at the rookies and how they've got on so far? We've got Marco Bezzecchi, Darren Binder, Remy Gardner, Ralph Fernandez, and Fabio Di Gianantonio. Bezzecchi currently the best of the rookies in the standings, at least in 18th. But Keith, how have you seen our rookies perform? There was especially a lot of heavy scrutiny on Darren Binder, who I think has performed above expectations so far. Still, as you say, a long way to go, though.
Yeah, I think Darren Binder, I mean, he's shown flashes of near brilliance, hasn't he, really, to not hit anybody to start with, which is pretty useful. I mean, he started his year very, very well, Darren Binder. He came in here with a fairly large name for being slightly overly aggressive, particularly in the braking area. And I think he's done a great job. I really do think he's done a great job. I think he can ride a motorbike brilliantly, and he's exciting. So, fingers crossed for Darren for the rest of the year. I think, for me, I mean, Tech 3 have been a bloody disappointment. I mean, KTM have been a disappointment overall, but the satellite team in Tech 3 with Hervé Poncharal and Guy Coulon, the management there, I mean, they must be devastated. I mean, they basically went to, when they didn't get the Yamaha satellite deal sorted out, they went to KTM. KTM were a bit on the up. But they've been disappointing across the board, I think, as well. You talk about Ducati being disappointed. What about KTM being disappointing? They've chucked the kitchen sink at it a bit this year, and it hasn't really worked out for them so far. Especially when they come off the back of some great performances over the last couple of years. So KTM's progress has been thwarted, and I think that's kind of held back the likes of Remy Gardner as well. Which you might. I know he's got a wrist injury, but we're yet to see the best from the rookies. I think that it's not quite been. Bezzecchi has got on really, really well. Which has he got on better than I thought he was going to get? Well, I think he has actually. I don't think I had. Bezzecchi, we know he can ride a motorbike, but I didn't have him as a top rookie at the time. But then again, what the hell do we know? Because we get it wrong every week.
That's something I think I might ask you at the end. Who's going to be your top rookie come the end of the season? So get thinking of that. I think that'll be a nice little thing to throw in the mix. But it's interesting you bring up the KTM point, especially with Tech 3, because right now it clearly is not a rider issue, is it, Pete? Because they've got Remy Gardner, Ralph Fernandez, not really performing any better than Iker Lecuona did last year in their lineup as well with Danilo Petrucci. So clearly that's a team issue there, it seems like.
Well, as Keith was saying, the bike, unfortunately, they were trying to get rid of this sort of up and down spiky performance, as Oliveira called it, where they're fantastic one week and then they sort of struggle to fight for the top six the next. And unfortunately, that trend seems to have continued. Now, Brad Binder's been a bit unlucky. He's been there, in qualifying, he's had a few issues and he started down the grid, that kind of thing. So not, maybe that masked things a little bit, but I think you've got to say, as Keith says, it's the problem is still there with this bike. On its day, when Oliveira won, didn't he, in the wet in Indonesia, when the bike works and it works with the rider, they're fantastic. But they can't get it to happen often enough to put together this sort of championship challenge or top three challenge that they kind of expected to do this year from their top management. So, yeah, I think people did expect more from the Tech 3 guys. Obviously, with their first and second in last year's Moto2 championship. I mean, these are two fantastically talented young guys, and at the moment, it's not working for them. Why is that? We're not sure. Is it because, as you say, is it the bike? Is it the team? Looking at Bezzecchi, I think Bezzecchi and Darren Binder are the two standout rookies so far, aren't they? I think that's pretty obvious from the two opening rounds. They've had their moments. Bezzecchi in practice, actually, I suppose Darren Binder as well. There's been some sessions where he's been really high up and shown that, once he gets the hang of this bike, he could be, seriously impressive on it. So. Fabio Di Gianantonio, another rookie on the same bike. Maybe I think perhaps we expected a bit more from him. Also because he was really fast on his first test on the bike last year in Jerez. He was the fastest rookie, which did surprise us. So he was sick in Sepang, wasn't he? And things like that. But, maybe I think we'd have expected him to be in the points. But yeah, definitely. I think we would all have said, if you were looking at rookies of the year before the start of the season, you'd have expected both Tech 3 guys to be leading that battle. And it hasn't happened for them yet.
Sticking with Tech 3, like one of the problems you've got, it doesn't matter how good your team is behind the counter. The fact of the matter is you've got two rookies in there and they get lost. You've got a motorcycle that's not working properly, and where the hell do they go? You've got no personal data from a rider perspective on how to fix something. It's every time they go out, and we know that there's not enough track time. When you turn out for FP1, you're trying to qualify straight away through to qualifying sessions. It's qualifying for qualifying, as we always say. Fact is, if you're all at sea, Rail might be making one mistake in one direction. Remy might be making a mistake in the other direction. You've got no base, baseline to be working from. That's when a Dovey in the team sort of holds onto the ship slightly and steadies it all up. It's really, really difficult when you've got some clever people at the background of Tech 3, but it's rider input. If you go in the wrong direction, there's no time to fix it. When you could go all the way down. What did Alex Briggs used to call it in the Yamaha camp when Alex worked for Valentino Rossi? Was it the gunpowder bloody solution or something, where you just fire everything at it and hope it comes out all right? But you can only do that if you've got a reasonable amount of knowledge, as Alex did, of course, with Valentino back in the day. But once you're going down the wrong route on free practice 1 on a Friday, you're basically set for the weekend. There just isn't the time to make that catch up. And then you get to the race and you're halfway, more than that, back of the grid, and you've got to work with. And every time you pass a rider, he's a tenth of a second faster than you were in practice. The next one is 2/10 of a second faster than you were in practice. The next one's 3/10 of a second faster. It's just a compounding problem. You've got to try and make your way through the field. So the chances are you're probably not going to make your way through the field. Really, really difficult from a rider and a team perspective. Not a place I'd want to be, that's for sure. Tech 3 is difficult at the minute.
Certainly is difficult as well. I think splitting the rookies, interestingly, is Alex Marquez and Dovey. So out of these sort of more experienced riders, they're the ones languishing at the bottom. We've got a couple of listener questions that have come in. Always lovely to hear from you as well. One of them actually, I think it picks up on something, Pete, you said earlier, how you haven't seen Yamaha bring anything notable in these opening races. And D. Smith, don't know what the D stands for. What is the reason for the reduction in testing time? No wonder teams don't want to make too many changes or bring anything too soon. You blow a season trying to dial the bike in, it seems.
Well, more races, wasn't it? That was the deal with the teams, if you like, between the organisers was, well, look, we'll swap a race weekend or a test for a race weekend. So you increase the calendar, which obviously the circuits pay a large amount of money to hold races. So that brings in money and it's shown on TV, and obviously that's points for the World Championship and everything else. So you swap them for tests, and by doing that, it's keeps the number of days away from home the same, shall we say. That's basically the idea. But as Keith has raised quite repeatedly, you've still got to do all of that testing work in a much smaller space of time. And you get what we see in these early rounds where teams are not really prepared. They're still looking for a base setting, as they keep telling us. So that's the downside to it.
I just don't get it, Harry. I mean, I really, really don't get it. I mean, I think that MotoGP have got some very intelligent people. Trackside, that's for certain. Really, really clever people, but somehow they've been a bit dim on this front. The fact of the matter is that there should have been more time for testing. You can't come to the end of a tech freeze and expect whatever there is in the pipeline to be tested at Mandalika, a brand new track that was breaking up anyway and they had no data for before. So everything there is pretty much negated by the time they got there to race. And the other one was Sepang, where it's like the Sweat Olympics. You've got, it's a really tricky racetrack anyway. Good racetrack, but really tricky. And that's it. They were test for the non-factory riders and so on and so forth, and for rookies and other little trimmings around the edges. But what they should have done was said, right, tech freeze, actually the homologation comes now, Portugal. So all this stuff that we've had before, you can bring upgrades and bits and pieces to the table, provided it's approved by the manufacturers and within the rules, of course. But tech freeze starts, the homologation cutoff is Portugal. That would have eased all that pressure. And they're not going to be spending any more. They're spending more money on development stuff, of course they are, but it will have given an opportunity for the teams to catch up by the time we got to where we are. Maybe Yamaha, I alluded to it earlier on, maybe Yamaha have got stuff in the pipe. They just didn't get it out there in time for Qatar, for when that cutoff came. We can't know what's going on behind the scenes. You can be fairly sure that Yamaha didn't stitch themselves up on purpose, and that's exactly what's happened. And Ducati, they were ahead of the game. Now, they might want to go a bit more retro. They might have got to Portugal and gone back to last year's bike, because the one that they homologated in Qatar doesn't seem to be working quite as well as the one previously. So there's surely an argument for more testing. I understand the financial side of it. You're increasing the amount of time away from home and all the rest of it. Well, hang on a second. This is what we do. I kind of don't have quite the sympathy that there seems to be out in the world for the teams. If the teams don't have the personnel to do the job that they're doing, then don't do the job. I understand that the stresses and strains that teams have, but that is the job. That is what we do. Long haul. I hear people complaining about long haul flights. What? Read a book, get on with it. I don't understand why this is such a major problem for so many people. It is knackering. It is really, really tough. But that is the job. That's what this is. It's MotoGP. It's the cutting edge. They're the fittest. They've got the fastest bikes. They've got the most budget. This is what we do. Maybe it needs to go like NASCAR. Where you've got two sets of team personnel. They're leapfrogging each other through the 40-round season of NASCAR or whatever it is nowadays. They go. They've got two sets of teams and they run these teams in parallel almost. They leapfrog each other over the next round. I'm not saying that's how it should be, but there must be other ways of relieving your team, taking some of the stress out of it, to be able to manage this in the way they do. You go back to two-stroke days. Those blokes worked every single night of every single day of the week because the bikes were so fragile. It wasn't a case of plugging in a computer and dialing in a new set of bloody settings or whatever it was. It was strip the entire motor every single night. Crack test. Yeah, who's ever heard of that nowadays? Crack test all the pistons. Crack test anything that might be vulnerable. You had to spray it with some stuff and watch it develop to see if it got any cracks in it, replace it with some new parts, whatever it was at the time. This went on every single night of the week. Blokes will burn in the midnight oil. You could wake up any time in the paddock and find someone to talk to. The tents were tents. There you go. That's how old it was. I'm not saying it should go back to that, but basically hard work is what it's all about. Hard work, dedication, and I struggle slightly when I hear these things that we shouldn't go to 20 rounds or whatever it is. If that's the way our season is going, if that's the way MotoGP expands into the future, then that's the way it should be. It's a case of manage the talent, the talent you have in the paddock, so that they do have safe and healthy lives within the paddock. Wouldn't be a bad thing to stick some decent toilets in the paddock to start with. You take a lot of stress out of you with that one. There are lots of things you can do to make life a little bit easier in the paddock, I've got to say. Still, management have a responsibility to manage the health of your... I'm not saying that we should wear all of our techs out. I'm saying what we should do is manage them better, look after them better, and give them the opportunity still to do the work that we need to do to get this thing where it needs to be. Or is that being unreasonable? Maybe that made me throw that open to everybody out there, Harry, because, am I taking a hard line on this? Am I being slightly unreasonable? I don't think so.
It's certainly, you're right. A lot of people currently working in the sport, in various motorsports, hate the idea. Obviously I look at the Formula One side of things, that's expected to be 23 races this year. Already it looks like that could very easily go to 25 next year. And the argument possibly is because of various budgets and cost caps coming in that they won't be able to sort of have certain crew members working the first 10 races, then they can swap them and they can work from the factory back at base, and then another, employ another whole set of people to come work at the car. So it's a cost thing as well that might implement your idea of being able to sort of manage it on a health kind of basis. But I am inclined to agree with you in a way. If it's managed well, then I don't see the issue of having more races, regardless of how long your calendar is. But then again, are you going to want to watch a 30-race MotoGP calendar?
Yes.
Yeah.
No problem. Yeah. I mean, I can only speak for myself when it comes to the hardships that you have in the paddock. It isn't quite. it isn't quite the glorious place that you might think it is. It is bloody hard work, but it's what we do, and it's what we get paid well for. I mean, I've missed the birth of 2 of my children because of MotoGP. You know, out of the 4 I've got, I've only ever seen 2 of them being born. I mean, and it is what it is. You know, your family are a part of the deal that you've done to be where you are. If you can't cope with it or don't want to do it for that reason, then perhaps you need to be based in the UK to do a UK-based job or something along those lines. I mean, or whichever country you come from, obviously. It is a tough job, and it takes a lot to do, and a certain type of person to do it. But holding back the sport because of because of that is not an option from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, I think that is the point I think you make. Well, you know, you've got to be a certain type of person, and you know, from my perspective, I don't know about yours, Pete, coming from a sort of more written journalist perspective, because you do, you know, when you're in the paddock, you have a different experience to the broadcast team for sure, or to the riders, or to the team personnel, the catering, whoever it is. Everyone has a different experience when they go into a paddock. You work me on the broadcast side, you know, I work weekends, and that's my issue, and I have to plan around that if I want to see my mates, if I want to see my family, you know, but that's my bed, and I've made it, and I'm happy to sit down in that and reap the consequences of that as it may come, because I love the job so much. What about you, from your perspective?
As you say, Harry, it's different with everybody, doesn't it? One thing I always remember is being on a flight to Phillip Island and seeing Danilo Petrucci, who was riding at the time, I think, for IRTA, you know, in the economy seats with a hoodie over his head. And you're thinking, this guy's going to be on the bike in a day. And he's being bumped by everybody going to the toilets and everything else. You know, there's so many different situations. I think you can't generalize it. If you're sitting in first class and you're flying around like most of the top riders do, I mean, I'm sure it's no issue for them. And Joan Mir has also raised this. He goes, look, for us, it's not really that big a deal. You know, we travel pretty well. But if you're a Moto2 mechanic, a Moto3 mechanic, it's a very different job. It's a very different lifestyle. You know, arriving somewhere, not having slept on the plane or whatever it is, you know, it's a different thing, isn't it, in those situations? I think, coming back to the question, I think the good thing about Keith's idea of delaying the homologation is it wouldn't affect this at all, would it? We could still have the same number of tests. You know, you wouldn't need to increase the tests because they'd be able to try these parts during the race weekends, during these opening race weekends. So you wouldn't be putting any extra burden on anybody. And then you make the cutoff point for the bike, the start of the European season. So I think that would be a good compromise for not having to do another test, you know, putting on another test. You just let people test during the race weekend, which again increases the interest also for everybody, because, what's that team trying? What engine have they got? What chassis have they got? And then you see the final package at the start of what would be coming up this weekend in Portimao. So for me, that's a good compromise. You know, delaying the homologation is a good way to fix this issue of, you know, increasing races, but not, you know, not taking away all the testing.
Quick one on the economy class thing. I know a team member who basically did a deal with his team to fly economy class if they gave him the difference in cash. So
clever.
So if you can stand economy class, it can be profitable.
Exactly. You can, when it's the off season, you can
no names mentioned
for a nice little holiday.
No names mentioned, but he's a very well-known man.
Well, you know what? It's actually a really interesting debate, I think, to have. So do get in touch in the comments. Let us know, you know, do you have sympathy for the people that work in the paddock when they complain about, you know, long haul flights, working all sorts of hours? Do you have sympathy for them, or is it just as Keith says, you know, it's part of the job? They make, you know, you make your bed and you lie in it. So let us know on that one.
Getting across you again, Harry. Sorry to butt in, but that's really my job. No. I don't know who these people are that complain, because I don't hear them. You know, you walk around the paddock.
I see it.
You know, it's not something it's not high on the list of complaints in a paddock from from my experience. I mean, you know, they kind of dig in like everybody else does. I mean, what Pete says is absolutely right. When you're traveling economy class to halfway across the world and you get up the next morning and you're out of your time zone and you've got to get on a 200-mile-an-hour motorbike, that's a big deal. I always used to be impressed with the likes of Fogarty and Co. when they used to do that in World Superbikes back in the day. You know, they travel at the last minute, land, race, fly home again. And again, if you are in economy class where you're getting bumped and barged, which you always are in economy class anyway, or you've got some kid that's banging the back of your seat or whatever it might be. We should do a list on pet hates on flying, because I've got a bloody long list. But I mean, the point being is that when you travel in business class, which most do, and a lot of the mechanics do as well out of the bigger teams, business class or first class, if you get upgraded, you lay down, you have a sleep. You still don't sleep well, because you don't sleep well because you're on an aeroplane. Your nose is like concrete because it's dried out when you get to the other end anyway. And if you're on one of them airlines that turn the oxygen down on the overnight flights as well, you wake up in the morning with heart palpitations trying to get breath, trying to get some oxygen. Flying is an absolute art form, being able to do it well. But the point being is that it must be managed better. Maybe I've not seen or heard that much dissent in the paddock. I think the biggest dissent that I've heard is when the season is lengthened and the mechanics that are on factory contracts are not paid more for it. Now that I've heard that many times in the paddock, where the season is around longer, but within the mechanics contract, they're still getting paid the same money. Now that's wrong and shouldn't be, but it has happened. And funny enough, the first person I heard that from was from a Yamaha person, when it got increased in length and they weren't paid more money for their extra. Needless to say that some of those boys aren't in the paddock anymore.
Well, and then it does come back to the management side of things. The sport will inevitably grow. They want to be in more countries. They want to be more present in areas where